This mistake cost Xbox $80 billion. What's up, y'all? I'm Ray, and this is my channel, Xbox Ready, where we get on and we talk about Xbox stuff. The latest news, rumors, games, accessories. I want to fill you in on everything that's going on in the world of Xbox. I want to make sure that you're Xbox Ready. It might be hard to believe right now because Microsoft, over the past couple of years, have fired so many developers, shut down so many studios that are part of their gaming division. But at one point, Microsoft was not afraid to crack open the checkbook and make some big moves to help Xbox out, mostly through studio and publisher acquisitions. Did you know that Microsoft, since 2015, has spent $80 billion on mergers and acquisitions for Xbox? Of course, a big chunk of that went to acquiring Activision Blizzard, but $7.5 billion also went to acquiring ZeniMax Media, which includes all of these guys here. Just over $2 billion for Mojang, and of course, they bought up all of these other studios. Some of these you might recognize, others you may not. Some that are on this list are no longer with us. Moment of silence for them. One of these studios in particular, though, are going through a rough time, and it signals a much larger problem happening at Xbox. Just a year ago, Obsidian seemed primed for an absolutely legendary year, whereas other Xbox studios seem to just be chilling, saying, oh, I'll release a game whenever I feel like it, whenever I'm ready. Obsidian was grinding. They were putting in the work. They had 3 games released in 2025, and if we're looking at straight output, Obsidian has been Xbox's most prolific studio over the past couple of years. They've shipped Pentiment, Grounded, Avowed, The Outer Worlds 2, and Grounded 2 in the time it's taken to see even just one more trailer for State of Decay 3. No, what happened? What happened? No, what happened? I had the script. I had it. It turns out, though, that 2025 was not the legendary year that people were hoping Obsidian would have. That's coming from this interview that the studio head recently did with Bloomberg. The big takeaways from this are that Avowed and The Outer Worlds 2 did not sell as well as expected. It wasn't disastrous according to Obsidian, but it was enough for them to take a step back and be like, okay, what went wrong? What can we learn from this? This has resulted in them saying, okay, no more Outer Worlds. Outer Worlds 2 is going to be the last in the franchise. We're not going to do a third one. With Avowed, though, they're planning on continuing in that universe at least. I don't know if there's going to be an Avowed 2, but they do plan to keep making games in Aora in that Pillars of Eternity universe. Grounded 2, though, doing pretty well apparently. So 1 out of 3 games. So the lessons here are, oh man, we spent 7, maybe even 8 years developing Avowed and The Outer Worlds 2, and they didn't sell so hot. Meanwhile, Grounded 2, bigger map, 4-year development cycle, and it's selling really well. So they're trying to stick to that formula. They want smaller development cycles, games with smaller budgets, and that absolutely makes sense. A lot of people were looking towards Avowed like it was going to be the next AAA RPG fantasy banger, something to hold them over until The Elder Scrolls 6 finally comes out in 10 years. But that's just not what Obsidian does. They should make smaller, weirder games at a quicker clip. They tried the whole action RPG situation with Avowed, didn't really work out, so they should backpedal to their roots, which is story, good writing, and deep RPG mechanics. Those games will be more niche, sure, but they're hopeful that Microsoft will continue to fund them, even though they don't meet that 30% number that Microsoft is putting on their studios. And that's the most interesting part of this entire interview. Sure, it was cool to get an insight on how Outer Worlds 2 performed, Avowed performed, whatever, but here's that 30% number popping up again. For context, this is a number that it broke that Microsoft is imposing on their studios, a 30% accountability or profit margin that they need to adhere to in order to continue operations. Microsoft has been like, no, we never said that. Everyone is different. We have different standards for different studios. We don't expect all of our games to make the big bucks. Microsoft on one end is saying that. Obsidian, the studio head, is saying another thing, and I'm more inclined to believe the studio over Microsoft at this point. This isn't super surprising to me. There was no one more excited for Avowed than me. I was pumped. But overall, I just thought it was pretty good, okay. There were some things I liked about it. I can appreciate what they were trying to do with the combat. I liked the traversal. I liked the sense of discovery and adventure that I was having, especially in those first 2 zones. But I just was not connecting with the story, the companions. I thought Sappadal was the goofiest, most annoying, person inside my head character trope ever. I just wanted to skip through all of that as fast as I could. There's also kind of a what-if situation here with Avowed, because before it was the Avowed we knew today, it was supposed to be what people are describing as Skyrim meets Destiny, some sort of multiplayer PvE based game, maybe some raiding aspects to it, but in a fantasy universe with swords and sorcery. Now, on one end, I am curious to see how that version of Avowed would have come out, purely because ultimately what we got between Outer Worlds and Avowed, I mean, both of those games are very, very similar. So if Avowed had stayed on track with that original vision, Obsidian would have been delivering 3 very distinct, very different games. But at the same time, that could very easily have turned into a situation where they ship that version of the game and it flops, people are pissed off, oh, Xbox made them make this game that Obsidian doesn't typically make. Just like what happened with Arcane Austin and Redfall. Oh, why are they making this live service looter shooter? Ultimately, I understand why they had to make that pivot with Avowed. They made a good attempt, and while there were some things that I thought were fun and enjoyable about the game, overall it wasn't a home run for me personally. And the Outer Worlds 2, it was the same thing. I'm like, okay, there's some pretty good things about it, but nothing that's jumping out at me and really making me want to keep on playing. Pretty good, but not a home run. And I'm just gonna say it, I think it's weird to put out an RPG in the modern age where there's no romance options. I think that's weird. I want to travel to a fantasy world and I want to hit on fantasy baddies. Like in The Witcher 3, which hot sorceress do you want? Cyberpunk, yes, so let's take a ride, Pan Am. Baldur's Gate 3, Mass Effect, all the great RPGs have some sort of romance. Even Skyrim, to a lesser extent, you can get married in that and have a family. You know, it's so weird and Avowed because there was like flirtatious options, but they led nowhere. I'm like, what is going on here? So if this 30% accountability thing is real, which ones of Xbox Studios, what games are they putting out that meet that criteria? Which ones on this list from the games they released since 2020, since they bought all these studios, which games are meeting that 30% number? I was curious because, again, Microsoft has spent a ton of money on acquiring all of this IP, all of these studios, all of their resources. And I wanted to dive in to see if it was worth it for Microsoft from a business perspective. So I went through so many of the games that have been released by Xbox Game Studios over the past 5-6 years. The problem is, though, is that it's so hard to find concrete sales or financial anything regarding any Xbox game. They have ballpark numbers like, oh, it's sold this much on Steam, but we don't know how many copies were sold on Xbox or how, many people played it through Game Pass. Like when they released Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition, they sold at least 1.6 million units because that's how many it sold on Steam and has generated maybe 14 million in revenue, but we're not entirely sure. Even with their most successful games, we know that Forza Horizon 5, for example, sold a minimum of 11 million copies, but they have a player base of upwards of 50 million. How many of those bought the actual game or how many played it through Game Pass? We don't know. Same thing with Grounded. We know that there are around 5 to 8 million copies sold, but they have a total player base of upwards of 15 million. Again, that player base, that engagement, whatever metric that Xbox is using to track this and then market it to people. When it comes to poor performing games, that's where this whole system really works. Like with Hellblade 2, you can't really put a hard sales number on that, but people kind of do their own research, so they're like, well, Hellblade didn't crack into the top 20 played games on Xbox. It didn't break the top 100 sales charts in the European Union. Therefore, we can surmise that Hellblade 2 probably didn't sell very well, probably didn't do very well financially. What I found interesting, though, is that a lot of the games that people said were terrible or flops, like Starfield or Halo Infinite, actually did pretty damn well financially. This paints an interesting picture because we're seeing what $80 billion has gotten Microsoft and fans. But 80 billion is an astronomical sum of money. And just from the numbers that I was looking at from their first-party games, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what they spent. Gaming revenue peaked at around like 23 billion annually last year for Xbox. So if the machine stayed the same, we could assume that it would take 4, maybe 5 years to reach that 80 billion, get it back. But that doesn't take into account the cost it takes to maintain the whole operation, to attract third-party partners to the platform and to Game Pass, and also the cost to develop these games and market them as well. What we're also seeing here is that Xbox, they've put out a lot of games over the past 5-6 years. And when you look at them as a collective, it's a pretty solid lineup, like a good supporting cast, the equivalent of like a solid bench in the NBA. But what we're not seeing is any games that are really breaking out and becoming stars. There's no LeBron James, Steph Curry, or new gen stars like Anthony Edwards, Victor Wembanyama, which is a real shame because we got a Halo game this generation. And even if it did well financially as a live service ongoing game for Xbox, all of this money, all of these games that Microsoft and Xbox have released since 2020, it hasn't improved their position in the video game industry in terms of mind share. All of this money, all of these 8 of 10, 7 of 10, 9 of 10 games, and people are still saying Xbox is dying, Xbox sucks. Do they even have a future in this industry anymore? They need their heavy hitters to come back in a major way. They need their tentpole franchises to live up to the hype and support the entire operation. They need their ongoing games to do well as well. Call of Duty cannot flop anymore because then it has this domino effect that puts pressure on their smaller studios like Obsidian, and then when they can't perform, the whole thing kind of starts to fall apart. And let's just come out and say it, Microsoft, Xbox, they are just terrible at managing their current IP right now. They're sitting on a gold mine of all of this stuff that they've bought up, gobbled up over the past few years. And number one, from this new batch of games that they've been putting out, there hasn't been another breakout star to rally around and build a franchise with. I thought there would be potential for Senua and Hellblade 2. They're making a third Hellblade game, but Senua, she's not up there with Marcus Phoenix, with Master Chief. No, she's towards like the bottom tiers. Same thing with Outer Worlds 2, that easily had franchise potential and they discontinued it. I'm getting worried that with a lot of these new games that they're trying out, like South of Midnight and all of the other smaller AA games, that those are going to start to disappear because Xbox is so worried and they want a sure bet. So let's make another sequel, let's do another remake. But they're not even giving us the sequels and remakes that we want. I will never understand why Microsoft thought they could wait to make Fallout 5. If I was the king of Xbox or Microsoft or in charge of things, as soon as I bought Bethesda, I'd be like, guys, Starfield, stop it. Just stop it. This is not what people want. Get everyone you have to work on getting out Fallout 5 and Elder Scrolls 6 as soon as humanly possible. Because eventually there's gonna be a TV show about Fallout. Everyone is gonna love it and they're gonna wanna play a new Fallout game. That's when we strike. Forza Horizon 5 has been pretty much the only game for them that has been an undisputable success. With the critics, with the sales, with Game Pass engagement, pretty much every metric. But you need more than that. In basketball, ideally, you have a big three stars to carry you to that championship, build that dynasty. At minimum, you need 2, and maybe like a 2.5, like the Golden State Warriors had with Steph, Clay, and Draymond. Playground Games, Forza Horizon 5, they need help. Despite what Xbox has done in the past, though, they still have one last chance to turn it around and churn out those big hits, give us those star players that can prop Xbox game studios up with those tentpole franchises so the rest of those smaller studios can just do their thing and take some big creative swings. Reinforcements are on the way, and we got a glimpse of that in Developer Direct just a couple of weeks ago. Fable and Forza Horizon 6 are looking really, really good. I'm hopeful for that. We knew going into Developer Direct that Xbox had way more that they could fit in one singular show. There's even talk that there's going to be another Developer Direct sometime in 2026. It's not set in stone just yet, but we could be looking at a year that features not only Fable and Forza Horizon 6, but Gears of War E-Day, which I mean, I don't know how you can really mess that up. I know that they had a bad time with sales on Gears of War 5, but returning to Marcus and Dom and exploring Emergence Day, I mean, you cannot mess that up. Then there's other games like Clockwork Revolution, which everything that we've seen from that game looks awesome. In Exile seems super pumped about it. Xbox has an opportunity here to really open the floodgates in 2026 and show them their true power. Pump out products and games that really show the power of Microsoft's wallet and the $80 billion that they invested into these studios. And if they can't, I'm honestly afraid of what might happen to these studios. We've seen Microsoft drop the axe on Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, The Initiative. Some of those studios, they went out of their way to say, yeah, we really like the games that they're making, you know, their success and all these metrics, blah, 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 and oh yeah, they're closed now.
And it's gone!
I'm still hopeful that Playground Games, that the Coalition, and Xbox's other studios will provide us with a memorable year in 2026. Because the other scenario is just too depressing, too bleak to even fathom. Anyways, guys, that's all the Xbox stuff I gotta talk about today. Thanks so much for joining me for another edition of Xbox Ready. If you made it this far into the video, consider subscribing. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.